Let's get started while people are still getting their pizza. My name is Melissa Del Aguila. I'm the Assistant Director of the Center for Human Rights and Humanitarian Law. Welcome to the third annual Human Rights Opportunities, the Student Advisory Board and beyond. You've heard a lot this week about different opportunities at WCL. I think some of you may have even stopped by our booth at Opportunities Day. But today we're here to talk about human rights opportunities, and in particular the many opportunities that come from being a member of the Student Advisory Board, what we call the SAB. But first, I want to begin by introducing our esteemed panel of speakers today. To my right, I have Lauren Bartlett, Program Director of the Center's local Human Rights Lawyering Project. She was a member of the 2005 SAB. Then we have Lilah Rosenblum, partner at the law firm of Lichtman and Elliot PC, 2004 SAB member. Then we have Jake Brody, current 2L student and member of the 2013 Student Advisory Board. And last but not least, we have Lizzie Rushing, country analyst for the Internal Displacement Monitoring Center, who's patching in all the way from Geneva, Switzerland. Lizzie, thank you very much. And she was a member of the 2006 SAB. So these are just 4 members of an 80-plus person network of young professionals, and soon-to-be young professionals, many of whom are now working in the human rights field, and all of whom were in your shoes at one time or another, wondering, I'm interested in human rights, but how do I get involved, and what is the SAB? Well, if you've been to our website, and hopefully you have, you learned that the Center's Student Advisory Board is a group of highly qualified, committed students interested in human rights and humanitarian law. The SAB works closely with the Center and takes the lead in development of programming that reflects student interests and priorities. There have been 11 SABs since 2013. It started as the brainchild of Center Executive Director Hidar Harris and has evolved into one of the flagship student initiatives of the Center. So how this discussion will run, we're going to start by having these awesome SAB alumni here to tell you more about their experiences as WCL students, what they've been up to since graduation, and how the SAB has impacted their career trajectories. Then Jake, our current SAB member, will talk in more detail about his experience as a current SAB member and get into the nitty-gritty. What does it mean to be an SAB member? Who joins the SAB? And then we really want to spend a lot of time opening it up to questions. So please be prepared. But I guess let's just get started. And I think if we could just go down the line, we'll have everyone talk about what activities you were involved in as a law student and what have you done since graduation. So we'll start with Lauren.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. So I sort of did all of the human rights activities that seemed possible when I was in law school. I was a student advisory board member for the center. I was also a dean's fellow at the center. My last year, I wrote for the human rights brief and the sustainable development law and policy brief. I did the dean's anti-torture project. Went with him to Geneva. I also was a very active member of Action for Human Rights, organized some experiential learning projects, and also started the alternative winter and spring break trips down to New Orleans after Hurricanes Katrina and Rita. So lots of different human rights activities. I think the Student Advisory Board, being different than all of those other activities, gave me a lot of insight into what else I should be doing here as a student related to human rights, and also gave me access to the different programs that the center was holding, and I was able to organize a conference with the center on land rights, very interesting, and also was able to start those alternative winter and spring break trips down to New Orleans after the hurricane. So I think that there's all sorts of opportunities, but the Student Advisory Board really is a great way to get involved deeply in organizing projects, conferences, panels, events, and also being involved in the different projects that we currently are running at the center.
So when I was in law school, the human rights activities that I was involved with are similar to Lauren. I did the human rights brief, I think, for all 3 years. I was on the student advisory board, and I also was in the human rights clinic, which was a very formative experience for me. Now an immigration lawyer, and we did a lot of immigration cases. Is that better? Okay. Sorry about that. I hope everyone heard the first part. And so essentially that's what I was doing during law school, and it really actually, the clinic in particular got me really focused on immigration law. Had a very interesting year-long case that I was working on that was asylum related, and right at the end of the year, we had our final hearing, and we won, and that day was literally one of the best days of my life because this client, like, I had really internalized, which is not necessarily a healthy thing, everything that he had been through in his home country and his family members and the torture and everything. And so the day that we won that case was just amazing for me. And so I think that really sparked an interest in being able to do that for my life's work. And so in immigration law, it's kind of a unique area of the law in that it allows you to see results in kind of a short time frame for individual people who have issues, and to be able to get someone a green card or to get them asylum or to somehow help them and make their lives better in a kind of concrete way is pretty amazing. And so I think, a lot of what I learned during law school and the activities I was involved with kind of pushed me in that direction. So to be able to continue on that trajectory is nice. So the types of cases that I work on, I don't want to sugarcoat it. I definitely do a lot of cases that aren't related to human rights issues necessarily. I am always obviously dealing with people from other countries and learning about different cultures and languages and stuff like that. But I do a lot of employment-based and family-sponsored immigration. But the most interesting and compelling work and meaningful work to me that I do is working with special immigrant juveniles, which there are green cards available to individuals who are either have been abused, abandoned, neglected by one or both parents, are here in the U.S., they're under 21, unmarried, and they're somehow under the jurisdiction of the juvenile court system. So we work a lot with foster care kids who are, either unaccompanied minors or who were here with a parent who then abused or abandoned or neglected them. So to be able to make one thing in their life better and okay and normal is like one of the best things. Like those cases are the closest to my heart, I think. We do asylum cases. We have an occasional humanitarian parole case. And so those types of cases do relate to human rights issues, and the people that we're working with are coming from areas of conflict or who have experienced themselves human rights violations, torture, and abuse. So those cases are, that's what keeps me going and doing what I do. So, did you?
Lizzie?
Hi. Yes, thanks so much for inviting me and for providing the technology to let me speak from so far away. Apologies in advance if you're a cat or a husband in the house. I'm calling in from home. It sounds like I had a similar experience to the other two speakers in the sense that we took every advantage of the many that WCL had to offer for human rights experience. Probably, I think I can speak on behalf of all of us at the expense of sleep, that it was worth it. So I also served on the Student Advisory Board, wrote for the Human Rights Brief. I was a Dean's Fellow for the War Crimes Research Office and for the Center. And I also was a student attorney in the International Human Rights Law Clinic. And I'd say, since I can speak at length about all of those activities, but since this one is focused specifically on the Student Advisory Board, I'd say that the three main skills that I took away from that experience that are still very applicable to my work today would be public speaking, because Hadar would always push you into the microphone whether you wanted to be or not, and that was very useful to learn. Organizing events, such as this one from scratch. No one would be at the student advisory board and say, this is an issue that we've all been following. We do something about this. We organize an event, and who will we invite, and making it happen from start to finish has been something that's been very useful in my work since. And also grant writing has come in very handy, and that was something that we sort of did on the side, was learn how to write grants, and especially if you're going to be working in the nonprofit sector. That's a skill that's essential. So what I've done since I left WCL was actually I was in the dual degree program. So I spent 2 years at WCL and 2 years at the University of Paris in Malta. The summer in between, I was interning at the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, working in their technical cooperation and field operations division for Africa. I then completed my 2 years at Malta and came back to Geneva, where I've been since. So I started off with a consultancy at UNAIDS. I then worked with the International Committee of the Red Cross for 2 years as a reporting officer for Central and Southern Africa. And then I started my current position with the Internal Displacement Monitoring Center, which is part of the Norwegian Refugee Council, but we're sort of the reporting and watchdog branch, advocacy branch of the Norwegian Refugee Council. Our mission statement is essentially to monitor, report on, and advocate for the rights of internally displaced people. Probably don't need to explain this to this particular group, but that would be people who are forced to flee their homes because of conflict or violence or natural disasters, but who remain within a national border. So do not cross an international border to become a refugee. She saw that? Okay. And I serve capacity as a country analyst for West Africa. So I travel to the field regularly to gather research. My priority countries are Côte d'Ivoire, Nigeria, and Mali. And as you've been following the news, Mali was a particularly volatile or complex situation last year, so particularly there. So I go and I try to figure out what the gaps are in the humanitarian response and bring that information back to Geneva and put it in the hands of people who can hopefully change, hopefully fill those gaps. And I have to say we're always looking for interns, and I always make room for WCL alumni or 1Ls, 2Ls who are interested. We have a lot of interesting legal projects that so if anybody is interested in get in contact with me.
Thanks, Lizzie. Lauren, do you want to talk about your trajectory? It's very interesting.
Should. So when I left WCL, I was very interested in working on human rights here in the United States. And the hurricanes Katrina and Rita had hit my 2L year of law school. The same year I was on the student advisory board for the center, and I started doing all sorts of student organizing, started the alternative winter and spring break trips down to New Orleans, bringing law students to volunteer at different organizations doing hurricane recovery work. Anyways, I ended up starting a nonprofit organization in New Orleans as a 3L from here, and it was called the Louisiana Justice Institute, and it was a nonprofit dedicated to doing social justice work throughout Louisiana. We started mainly focusing on healthcare and also workers' rights in the greater New Orleans area. I stayed there for about a year I'm happy to talk about starting a nonprofit as a law student. If you have questions about that, it's a difficult thing, getting funding, finding mentors, folks who can help you introduce you to litigation. It's a very interesting thing to start a nonprofit, right? During your 3L year. But I stayed there for about a year and realized I needed some better mentorship and some more litigation experience, and I went to work for Southeast Louisiana Legal Services, which is a legal aid organization in New Orleans. And there I focused on housing, mostly foreclosure prevention with homeowners. The housing crisis, the foreclosure crisis had just started when I began working there in 2008. And I represented over 400 homeowners in foreclosure in bankruptcy court and state court. And I came back to D.C. a couple of years ago to work on a project here at the Center for Human Rights and Humanitarian Law, which I have been directing, called the Local Human Rights Lawyering Project. And what I do is I work with legal aid attorneys across the United States to help them integrate human rights law into their work. So they make human rights law arguments in state courts and before local policymakers. This is a first-of-its-kind project. We work closely with organizations in Texas and Maryland, but also now organizations in as far away as Washington State, California, Maine, all over the place. And hopefully, the project was slated to be a 2-year-long project, but it's still up and going a little more than 2 years later. Hopefully, we'll still have funding, and if any of you are interested in working with me on that project, I'm always looking for volunteers, although I don't have Dean's Fellowships. So that's something you can do this semester, in the summer, or in the fall. All sorts of great research, writing projects. There's also a project out of Maryland. They're looking at housing court and trying to make some international human rights arguments about the problems they're having with housing court, and making a huge presentation to a statewide judiciary conference. So if anybody's interested in helping with that project with Maryland Legal Aid, I'd be happy to put you in touch with them as well. But that's sort of been my trajectory. I'm more of the human rights in the U.S. In poverty law person. But it all started at the center, in the various human rights work that I did here at WCL. So.
I know, Lizzie, you already touched on the different aspects of being on the SAB that impacted your career, but I was wondering if others could also sort of parse out specific parts of the SAB that you think have been most impactful for you now.
Yeah, I think Lizzie's definitely right. Public speaking was something that I was very shy as a law student. I'm still shy, but I can at least get up and speak in front of folks and not shake and be completely nervous. And that all started with the speaking that I did on the Student Advisory Board fundraising. We also did grant writing. Each year there's different what are they called? Skills development workshops that the Student Advisory Board does. And fundraising and public speaking are always part of those workshops. Also think just having access to the different project directors at the center and the executive director, Hadar Harris, on a regular basis. We're doing pretty great work. We have an anti-torture project with Juan Mendez, the Special Rapporteur on Torture. There's my project. There's Human Rights and Education. There's always very interesting events happening, people coming through. We know folks who work in all sorts of different capacities who can get you internships and jobs. So I think it's a very unique experience. It's not like having a mentor professor. It's like having a mentor practitioner who's here at the law school. So I think it's a good thing. Jay can talk more about that. But for me, it was really great. Hadar was and has been always a great mentor for me, and I got to know her as a Student Advisory Board member.
Yeah, I would echo what Lauren and Lizzie said about the SAB and the skills that they learned. And in addition, for me, it was nice to find a place where there were other people who cared about the same things that I cared about and wanted to work on them. And it's a way to kind of, if you have a specific interest, to put them into action, not just think about, oh, there's this issue I'm reading about, I'm interested in, but let's have an event about it. And, you know, you learn how to organize events and put them together from start to finish, which was, I think, very useful. So, yeah, I think of that way, Student Advisory Board, it allows you to not just kind of be in the ivory tower and think about things, but to, like, do them, too, and do something about it and, you know, teach others about it. If you're going to bring a panel to discuss a particular issue, you're educating your peers about that issue as well.
And before we hear from Jake, I have one final question. Can you all share any advice you have regarding opportunities at WCL, not just the SAB, but in general? Related to human rights. Oh, sorry. Lizzie, do you want to start?
Sure. I mean, I think we would have a lot of similar advice, so I'll speak to my part that's maybe different from the other panelists, which is the dual degree program. It was relatively new, and in some ways it is still new, but I think that for people who were interested, for finding a leg to work it outside of the United States, I found it incredibly useful. Not to mention bringing up to speed my technical French and learning about the law in the civil law system. So having a common and civil law background was also very valuable. Otherwise, it's hard to say which experience made the biggest impact, but I would say I would really have regretted not being part of the International Human Rights Law Clinic as well while I was at WCL.
I too think that the Human Rights Clinic was just an amazing experience. So I think that probably had a huge role, as I said, in my current career. I also did a dual degree program, but not the one that Lizzie did. I did one with AU, with School for International Service, and I focused on international affairs with a emphasis on the human rights component. And that was also a useful way to kind of be involved in human rights issues and learn more specifically about them. So I think those two things probably.
I mean, and for me, it would have been the, alternative winter breaks. I think those trips are fabulous if you want to go down to New Orleans or do the other, I don't remember where they went this last year during the spring break trip, but I think those are fabulous experiences. You can get a week of great volunteer experience at a great nonprofit doing important work in New Orleans, or sometimes they've gone to Arizona down to the border or other places, Native American reservations. So I think those are really fantastic experiences that if you have the time and you want to go do some volunteer work, you think it's great. The first trip I took down after Katrina, I went and actually worked in Mississippi, and I still have very close relationships with the folks I worked with there, and they can provide me a reference if I ever needed it from a 1 week long trip I took, however many years ago. So I think that would be great. And also the Dean's Anti-Torture Project is fantastic. If you want to go to Geneva with him and see the inner workings of a UN committee, there's nothing like it. And I think it's a great experience, and I would highly recommend that you apply. And if you aren't selected the first time, apply again, and you'll likely be selected the second year. So I would say those would be my top two.
Great. And I would consider you for fondue when you come to Geneva. Yes. Because Boys and Knights is not for fondue, because of us who are based here. So.
Excellent. Jake, can you please tell us a bit about what you're involved in at WCL, and then talk about your SAB experience this past year?
Sure. Can everyone hear me? Is this working? Okay. So here at WCL, I am a member of the Student Advisory Board. I also am a student attorney with the UNRO Human Rights Impact Litigation Clinic, which is different from the International Human Rights Clinic. And I'm also on a journal here at school. So. And I was a Dean's Fellow for Melissa for the Higher Education and Development Project at the Center for this past summer. Okay, so a little bit about the SAB and its current form. I'll go through sort of the who, what, where, when, why, if I can. What the SAB is, it really changes every year. I would say this year it's probably different from the experience of my predecessors, and that really comes from the freedom and flexibility you're given as an SAB member. You come in, and like everyone mentioned, you have access to these wonderful resources and mentors at the center, and your role is not only to contribute to the center's projects, but also to utilize those resources to contribute to the WCL community and sort of advocate for human rights issues. This year, if some of you are familiar with our coffee hours, bring an educational component to the law school, and really it's what you make of it. I would say who is on the SAB, it's students, I wrote it down, but students who are passionate about human rights and eager to connect with other like-minded students. I wasn't on the human rights brief, and not everyone on the current SAB is, but we all share this commitment to becoming better informed about human rights issues and also informing our peers. It's a really great network of people to be with. And also those who, like I said, they want to contribute to the center initiatives and to center programming in some way. I think Lauren's example of starting those alternative breaks is probably one of the highlights that you can get out of that statement. But things like the coffee hour, we did the human rights boot camp this past fall, really trying to bring everyone into the fold. Some of the really great benefits of being on the SAB would definitely have to be those skill seminars that were mentioned. Those are sort of one of the first things you'll do is sit down with each other and go through what you want those skill seminars to be. So there are some, Hadar Harris does the grant writing seminar each time for each round of SAB members, but you also are able to choose. So this year we added in a social media seminar. We also did an interviewing seminar. And one of the more recent things we were able to do was sit down with Melissa and Hadar and go through sort of career advice and have them read through our resumes and have a very personal discussion about those things. So that's also a great resource. And I think in general, just like I said, networking and forging those relationships with human rights interested students who right now are your peers but will be your colleagues, and your paths will, if they don't continually cross throughout your lives, they will parallel in many ways. And these are some of the most unique and special friendships that I've been able to develop here at the law school. So I hope that answers the question sufficiently.
Yes, you answered it beautifully. Thank you. I want to open it up to questions right now, mindful of time. So please feel free to go up to the mics if you do have any questions. Anything at all.
Well, hi. My name is Maria. I'm an LLM. And I'm very interested in, in the cause of, I worked with refugees, so I'm very interested in the cause of Syria. And I would love to hold an event, I don't know, first of all, to raise awareness of the situation, because I feel people here are not really aware of what's going on there. The numbers are outrageous. And second of all, maybe a fundraising, something like that, to really help people going through all this stuff. And I don't know if the SAB would be a good place to start with, maybe, or I could find other options. Or, if being a member of the SAB, would I be able to do all these kinds of events or not? That's my question. Thank you.
Yeah, so the year that I was on the SAB, there was a LLM student who was on the SAB with me. The issue is you have to commit to a year. I'm not sure we said that yet, but January through December. So if you're, oh, okay, great. So if that works for you, then I think it's great. And I think that planning events is one of the things that SAB definitely does, and so a Syria event would be a great place to start to come to the center. And we have lots of ideas and have been trying to think through how to have a Syria event. So in fundraising, I think that you probably want a student group to work with to do a fundraiser, but that the center could help you. The fundraising that I did after Hurricanes Katrina and Rita, we did through Action for Human Rights, which is a student group. But the center was definitely supportive, and the SAB members that I was on the board with were definitely helping to fundraise. So I think it would be a great idea for both those things. Yeah.
First of all, I have something to talk to you about after we're done. So my biggest question is just the time commitment, and you mentioned that it's a year long, but what are the other weekly commitments, monthly commitments, and just the expectations of the member in general?
So if you check our website, I think it says up to like a 15-hour per month commitment. And Jake, would you say that's about right?
I would say that's about right. You have a weekly meeting, depending on everyone's schedule, and then it depends. So as with any activity you're involved in, when you have a big event coming up, you're going to have to put in more hours. When we had boot camp coming up, that was a little more hours than normal, but that's with any organization, you're going to have those sorts of fluctuations. But I would say 15 hours a month is about right.
Right, and that includes one weekly meeting. It can be 1.5 to 2 hours a week, and it sounds like a really long time, but it's I think the perfect amount of time because we're a tight-knit group. We're all getting to know each other, and we try to be very productive during that time as well. Other questions?
I just want to say really quick, how many people are 1Ls? 1L, first-year students. I know it can be a very busy semester for you all. You've heard of all the projects and all the activities to get involved in at school. But really take the time and explore each of these opportunities in depth. This is really the start of your legal career. I guess everyone's sort of on their career trajectory. I'm just starting mine. But really take this opportunity this semester to learn about all of these offerings and email people at the center and get to know them. If you're on the student advisory board, if you're not, the school has so many human rights resources. Take advantage of it. So that's my pitch.
Thanks. Drew?
Hello. I have a question for Ms. Rosenblum and then for everyone in general. Ms. Rosenblum, did you do anything on the SAB that helped propel your career in immigration? And for everyone else, what was your favorite activity or the meeting that you had at the SAB that is just, if you could pick one memorable moment, you really enjoyed it?
I wouldn't say there was one activity with SAB that related directly to immigration. I don't think that there was. It was more a feeling of collegiality and working with others who are like-minded and who have similar interests that kind of kept me grounded in law school, where I wanted to be focusing on the things that I wanted to focus on. I mean, I think it's easy in law school to kind of lose sight of, why it is that you even came to law school. I mean, it can be competitive and overwhelming and stressful sometimes, but it helps you kind of keep your eye on the prize. Why am I here? Who are other people that are going to reinforce that, and what can we do to focus our energy on things that are productive and important to us? So I think it was more of a general thing that kind of kept me on, the road that I wanted to be on, rather than anything specific to immigration.
I would definitely echo that sentiment. I mean, when I walk in every week and see these people, and it keeps you so grounded. And I felt that way one year where, you sort of get lost in property and torts and contracts. And I look forward to it every week, going and hearing from Melissa and Hadar and speaking with everyone. A specific thing that really just encouraged my time was we had a coffee hour this past fall on Syria and the right to protect. And at one point, there were more than 30 student participants in the room with the speaker, and it was just so encouraging to see that you can actually encourage people to learn about these issues and through the SAB and through the center and motivate people to know and become informed. So.
I would say I would echo the collegiality. I think there was 6 members of the Student Advisory Board when I was a member, and 4 of us have remained very, very close friends. They're probably my closest friends from law school. You know, we also run into each other very, very often professionally as well. So I think that that's the best moments that I can think of when you're asking me are like us all laughing about something, or having dinner at Hadar's house when she cooked. She made the most delicious food, and us all sitting around having some sort of informal discussion about something. I mean, those are the, you know, sort of bonding moments. Yeah.
Lizzie?
Yeah, I can't add much to that. It's still things about just the planning sessions, the brainstorming, and keeping things in perspective. Because again, a lot of the courses that I did take in my first year, while some of them were surprisingly fascinating and I really enjoyed them, weren't the reason that I came to law school, and so it was kind of my anchor throughout the year. In one experience this class that I do remember, we organized a fast for dark for one day and asked law students to give up one thing, and a lot of people gave up coffee, and I remember that being a really interesting day.
Well, I wasn't a member of the SAB, but I do work very closely with the SAB, and I think I definitely want to echo what everyone else was saying about the collegiality and those moments of bonding and laughter, or I like to start meetings doing a weekend recap, and normally I'll talk about my dog or whatever, and it's just a really great time of the week that I, too, look forward to. Yeah, and I think that's carried through over the years. So any other questions? Well, if you do have any other questions and you didn't get a chance to ask them today, we are having a meet and greet, very informal, tomorrow with the current SAB. So you'll see Jake and 5 other of his peers from 11 to 1 in the back of the cafeteria. Very informal. Just look for Jake and a bunch of students and this flyer taped to the table. I want to thank all of our speakers again for coming here, for Skyping in, and all of you for coming. Thank you.
Thanks, Lizzie, especially.
Oh, no, I did the same with their video. I'm going to go, though. Thanks so much for having me, and it was nice to see those faces that I knew, especially Lauren and Brooke.
Bye, Lizzie.
Bye, Lizzie.
Bye. Bye.